She was humiliated for having no degree, but her project won the world prize. The chandelier light scattered across polished marble floors like fractured diamonds. 700 seats filled with the world's intellectual elite, professors, PhDs, research titans whose names adorned university buildings. Camera flashes punctured the elegant darkness as the International Innovation Summit reached its crescendo. She stood near the back wall, fingers clutching a worn leather notebook against her chest. The same notebook where she'd sketched her project by hand, late into countless nights when exhaustion made the lines blur. A juror at the head table leaned into his microphone, his voice dripping with aristocratic disdain. Curious, a candidate without a degree among awarded geniuses. Scattered laughter rippled through the crowd. Polite at first, then bolder. She didn't move, only breathed, deep and slow, the way you do when you're trying to remember you exist. So that you matter, that you're more than what they see. The presenter's manicured fingers tore open the golden envelope. Time stretched. The room held its breath. Her name echoed through the speakers. The applause came slowly, hesitantly, like thunder rolling in from a distance. Then stopped. Silence crashed down harder than any insult ever could. The narrator's voice emerged from the void. Before the applause came the laughter. Before the victory came the humiliation. Her name was Elena Cortez, though most people at the Industrial Research Facility simply called her the maintenance woman, or didn't call her anything at all. 34 years old, no college degree, no high school diploma even. Life had interrupted that plan when her mother fell ill and someone had to work. But what Elena lacked in credentials, she compensated for with an insatiable hunger to understand how things worked. While others saw machinery, she saw language. While others saw problems, she saw patterns waiting to be decoded. By day, she cleaned laboratories at Axion Technologies, one of the country's leading innovation firms. By night, she sat at her small kitchen table under a flickering light, surrounded by borrowed textbooks from the library, technical manuals scavenged from recycling bins, and pages upon pages of her own notes and calculations. She had taught herself advanced physics, material science, and engineering principles that most people spent 6 years in university struggling to grasp, not because she wanted recognition, but because she genuinely loved learning, the way some people love music or the way others love the ocean. Elena had been working on something, a water purification system that could work in areas with no electricity, using a combination of solar passive heating and a filtration method that mimicked natural geological processes. It was elegant, it was simple, it could save lives in regions where clean water was a daily crisis. But in a world that measured intelligence by the weight of paper certificates and the prestige of institutional stamps, Elena's mind didn't count. During a routine facility meeting, she had made the mistake of speaking up. Dr. Marcus Wexler, head of the research division, had been complaining about the lack of breakthrough thinking in the company's water division. Elena, standing near the back where she'd been changing a fluorescent bulb, had quietly mentioned her idea. The room had gone silent. Then someone had laughed. A sharp, cutting sound. Dr. Wexler's face had arranged itself into something between pity and contempt. "Elena," he'd said, his voice professionally kind in the way that's actually cruel, "leave the innovation to those who've been trained for it. Stick to what you know." The meeting had moved on, but something inside her hadn't. That night, as she sat staring at her notebooks, Elena made a decision that would reshape everything. If knowledge is a privilege, then I'll prove that the mind doesn't need permission to think. Elena's alarm shrieked at 4:47 a.m., 3 minutes before it was supposed to, but the clock was old and imprecise, much like everything else in her rented studio apartment. She rose in the darkness, feet finding the cold floor with practiced precision. No time for hesitation. The city bus didn't wait, and neither did the industrial complex where she worked. The morning routine was mechanical, instant coffee that tasted like burnt earth, 2 pieces of toast she'd eat on the commute, and the careful gathering of her cleaning supplies into the company-issued cart that waited for her at work. By 6:15 a.m., she was pushing that cart through the gleaming corridors of Axion Technologies, where the future was supposedly being built by people who'd earned the right to build it. The smell of industrial cleaning solution mixed with the faint ozone scent of electronic equipment. Her hands moved automatically, wiping down lab benches, emptying waste bins, organizing spaces where brilliant minds would arrive in an hour to solve the world's problems. But Elena's real work began at 11 p.m., after her shift ended. Her kitchen table became her laboratory. The stained formica surface disappeared beneath layers of sketches, calculations, and small-scale prototypes built from scavenged materials. She'd learned to see potential in things others discarded. A broken solar panel from the company's recycling bin became the heart of her purification system's energy source. Coffee filters and activated charcoal from aquarium suppliers became her filtration medium. The mathematics came harder. No professor to guide her, no teaching assistant to answer questions, just textbooks with previous owners' notes in the margins. YouTube lectures played at 2 a.m. with the volume low so neighbors wouldn't complain, and her own stubborn refusal to accept that some knowledge was forbidden to people like her. She had failed 17 times, 17 versions of her system that hadn't worked. Filters that clogged too quickly, solar collectors that didn't generate sufficient heat, containment vessels that cracked under pressure. On the 18th attempt, something changed. The water that emerged from her hand-built prototype was clear, pure, lab-tested by a friend who worked as a technician and didn't ask too many questions. Eleanor stared at her creation, assembled on her kitchen table from parts that cost less than $200, and felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Hope. The International Innovation Summit accepted submissions from anyone. Their website said so explicitly, open to all problem solvers, regardless of background. She knew it was probably just marketing language. Knew that when the judges saw her application, employment listed as maintenance worker, education listed as self-taught, they'd probably laugh and move on. But she submitted it anyway, because what did she have to lose except the dignity she wasn't sure she still possessed? The submission deadline was midnight. She pressed send at 11:47 p.m., then sat in the blue light of her laptop screen, wondering if courage and stupidity were really that different. 3 days after submitting her project, Eleanor made another mistake. She told someone about it. Gerard Chen was the lead engineer in the materials science division, one of the few people at Axion who'd ever spoken to her as if she were human rather than furniture. He'd sometimes ask about her weekend, remember her name, offer a genuine smile when their paths crossed, so when he asked what had her looking so distracted while she mopped the hallway outside his lab, she'd hesitated only a moment before telling him. I submitted something to the International Innovation Summit, she said, wringing out the mop. A water purification design, probably stupid, but Gerard's expression shifted, not unkind but puzzled. That's ambitious. What's your background in water systems? I don't have one. Not officially, I just figured it out. The words sounded pathetic even to her own ears. Gerard nodded slowly. Elena, I'm going to be honest with you because I respect you. These competitions, they're not really for people without credentials. The judges are looking at institutional backing, published research, documented expertise. It's not about the quality of the idea alone. I know that. Do you? His tone wasn't cruel, just realistic. Because I'd hate to see you get your hopes up for something that's structurally designed to exclude outsiders. She'd thanked him for his honesty, finished mopping, and thought that would be the end of it. She was wrong. The next morning, she arrived at work to find Dr. Wexler waiting in the main laboratory, along with several senior researchers. Gerard was there too, looking uncomfortable. Elena, Dr. Wexler called out, his voice carrying across the space. Gerard mentioned you've been dabbling in water purification. I thought it might be educational for the team to hear about your project. The way he said project made it clear he meant something closer to child science fair experiment. Her stomach dropped. I don't think... Come now, don't be modest. You submitted it to an international competition, didn't you? Clearly you believe it has merit. There were 8 researchers in the room, all with advanced degrees, all staring at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed amusement. Elena's hands tightened on her cleaning cart. She could walk away, should walk away, but something in Wexler's smug expression made her stay. It's a passive solar water purification system, she began, her voice quieter than she intended. Designed for areas without reliable electricity. Passive solar, interrupted Dr. Patricia Vance, one of the senior researchers. So, you're reinventing technology from the 1970s? Not exactly. The filtration method uses a multi-stage process that mimics how water naturally purifies through geological... And what's your background in geology? This from another researcher, arms crossed. I don't have one. Chemical engineering? No. Materials science? Microbiology? Anything relevant? Elena felt her face burning. I've studied on my own. Dr. Wexler held up a hand, silencing her. His smile was poisonous in its politeness. Elena, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but there's a reason we require advanced degrees for this kind of work. It's not gatekeeping, it's quality control. Innovation requires rigorous training, peer review, documented methodology. You can't just figure out complex systems at your kitchen table. But I did. The words came out sharper than she intended. Silence. Then someone laughed, a short, sharp bark of amusement that another researcher tried to cover with a cough. Dr. Wexler's expression hardened. Eleanor, you're a valuable member of our maintenance team, but please, leave the innovation to people who understand what they're doing. You wouldn't want a researcher telling you how to properly mop floors, would you? The comparison hit like a slap. Dr. Vance added, almost gently, Honey, there's no shame in knowing your limitations. We all have them. Elena looked at Gerard, hoping for, what? Support? Defense? He looked away. She turned and walked out of the laboratory, leaving her cleaning cart behind. Made it to the supply closet before the tears came. Hot, furious tears that she wiped away roughly because she refused to let them see her cry. In her pocket, her phone buzzed. An email notification. She almost didn't look. The sender, International Innovation Summit. Her hands shook as she opened it. Thank you for your submission. Unfortunately, your entry does not meet our credential requirements for consideration. We encourage you to reapply once you have completed formal academic training. The rejection was form letter polite, professional, final. Elena slid down to sit on the cold floor of the supply closet, surrounded by bottles of cleaning solution and industrial-sized paper towel rolls. She thought about Dr. Wexler's words, leave the innovation to people who understand what they're doing. And then she thought about the clear, pure water that had emerged from her hand-built prototype. Something hardened in her chest, something that felt like anger but burned brighter. They didn't want her innovation? Fine, she'd make it impossible to ignore. The following weeks blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and obsession. Eleanor began arriving home from work and immediately converting her apartment into a makeshift laboratory. The kitchen table wasn't enough anymore. She'd spread materials across the counter, the floor, even the bathroom sink, when she needed to test water flow rates. Her neighbors probably thought she was losing her mind. Strange chemical smells seeped under her door. The sound of tinkering and occasional frustrated cursing echoed through thin walls at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Sleep became optional. Food became fuel. Showering became an inconvenient necessity that interrupted her work. She refined the filtration system, making it more efficient, discovered that by angling the solar collector at precisely 23 degrees and coating it with a mixture of activated carbon and copper oxide particles, she could increase heat absorption by 34%. Learned through trial and error that ceramic filters worked better than synthetic materials, but only if she created a specific pore size distribution. None of this was in any textbook. This was knowledge earned through failure, through iteration, through the stubborn insistence that reality would eventually yield its secrets if she just kept asking the right questions. Her hands bore the evidence. Chemical burns from when she'd miscalculated an acid concentration, cuts from sharp metal edges, perpetual stains under her fingernails that no amount of scrubbing removed. She barely noticed. What kept her going weren't dreams of vindication or fantasies of proving Dr. Wexler wrong. It was simpler than that. She'd glimpsed something true about how water and heat and material properties could combine, and she needed to follow that truth wherever it led. On her kitchen wall, she'd taped up 3 things. First, a printout of the rejection email from the Innovation Summit. Second, a photograph she'd found online of children in a drought-stricken region, standing in line with empty containers, waiting for water that might not come. Third, a quote she'd copied by hand. The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled. Some nights, when the frustration of another failed iteration threatened to break her, she'd stare at these 3 things and remember why any of this mattered. The project evolved. Version 19, 20, 23. Each one better than the last. Each one teaching her something new about the intersection of physics, chemistry, and human need. She began documenting everything meticulously in her notebooks, not because anyone would ever read them, but because the process itself sharpened her thinking. Writing forced clarity. Diagrams demanded precision. By version 27, she had something extraordinary, A system that could purify contaminated water using only sunlight and gravity, no electricity required, no expensive replacement parts, built from materials available in even the poorest regions, capable of producing 20 liters of clean drinking water per day, enough for a small family, and it cost approximately $180 to build. Elena sat back one night at 3:47 a.m., staring at the working prototype humming quietly on her kitchen counter, and felt tears streak down her face, not from frustration this time, from something else, something bigger. She'd done it, actually done it, without permission, without credentials, without anyone's blessing, just her mind, her hands, and the refusal to accept that some problems were only meant to be solved by certain kinds of people. The question now was, what did she do with it? The International Innovation Summit had rejected her, made clear that people like her weren't welcome in spaces where real innovation happened. But then, Elena remembered something. She'd read about it months ago. A journalist named Sarah Rodriguez, who specialized in covering grassroots inventors and unconventional solutions to global problems. Rodriguez had won awards for her reporting, had a reputation for taking risks on stories others ignored. It was a long shot, probably stupid, but Elena had already established that she was comfortable with stupid. She spent the next 3 hours crafting an email to Sarah Rodriguez, not begging, not pleading, just a straightforward explanation. I've designed something I think matters. I don't have credentials. I do have something that works. If you're interested in seeing it, I'm willing to demonstrate. She attached photos, basic schematics, and water quality test results from her technician friend. Pressed send at 6:52 a.m., just as dawn light began filtering through her apartment windows, then collapsed into bed, still wearing yesterday's clothes, too exhausted to even remove her shoes. She dreamed of water, clear and pure and flowing endlessly, reaching people who'd been told they didn't deserve it. Sarah Rodriguez's response came 3 days later. Elena, your system is interesting. I'd like to see a demonstration. Are you available this week? Elena read the email 17 times, convinced she was hallucinating from sleep deprivation. They met at a coffee shop in a neighborhood that still felt accessible to Elena's budget. Sarah was younger than Elena expected, maybe 30, with sharp eyes and a recording device that she set on the table like a promise. Tell me why someone with no formal training thinks she can solve a problem that engineers with PhDs have been working on for decades, Sarah said. Not hostile, just direct. Elena appreciated that, respected it even. Because maybe the problem isn't as complicated as we've made it, she replied. Maybe we've been over-engineering solutions because that's what our training tells us to do. Maybe sometimes the answer is just about paying attention to how nature already solves these problems, and finding ways to replicate that without requiring infrastructure that most people don't have access to. Sarah leaned back. Show me. Eleanor had brought a small-scale version of her system in a backpack. Right there in the coffee shop, she set it up, filled the input chamber with water from the shop's tap mixed with dirt, bacteria from a test kit, and even a small amount of cooking oil. This would make most people violently ill, Elena explained, pointing to the contaminated mixture. She activated the system, explained each stage as sunlight from the window heated the solar collector, as the water began its journey through multiple filtration layers, as gravity and temperature gradients did their quiet, patient work. 20 minutes later, crystal clear water emerged from the output valve. Sarah stared. That was drinkable. I've tested it. Would you like to try? Sarah did, filled a small paper cup with the purified water, and took a careful sip. Then a longer drink. This is real, she said quietly. This isn't theoretical. This works. It works. And you've submitted this to innovation competitions? Elena's expression hardened slightly. The International Innovation Summit rejected it, said I didn't meet credential requirements. Sarah's eyes flashed with something that looked like anger on Elena's behalf. Did they even look at the project itself? I don't think so. Because you don't have a degree. Because I'm a maintenance worker who cleans laboratories while the real scientists do their work. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then, what if I told you I might be able to get your project in front of the summit judges anyway? Elena's heart stuttered. How? I have contacts, people who owe me favors, and I'm fairly sure this is the kind of story that could make waves if it's told right. A brilliant system designed by someone the establishment rejected because she didn't have the right paperwork. They already said no. They said no to Elena Cortez, self-taught inventor with no credentials. But what if the submission came from someone else? Someone with the institutional backing to get past the initial screening. The idea felt both exhilarating and fundamentally wrong. You mean lie? I mean, get your work judged on its merit instead of your resume. Once they see what it can do, the credentials won't matter. The project will speak for itself. Eleanor wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe the world worked that way, but she'd already learned it didn't. If we do this, Eleanor said slowly, and they find out, they'll use it as proof that I was trying to cheat. That I knew I wasn't good enough. So we make sure they don't find out until after you win. And if I don't win, Sarah smiled, sharp and fierce. Elena, I've seen a lot of innovation in my career. Expensive systems with 50-page patents and corporate backing and massive R&D budgets. What you've built in your kitchen for less than $200 is more elegant and effective than most of them. You're going to win. We just need to get you in the room. Eleanor thought about the rejection email, about Dr. Wexler's contemptuous smile, about years of being invisible, being dismissed, being told that her mind didn't matter because it hadn't been certified by the right institutions. Okay, she said. Let's do it. Sarah nodded. I'll need detailed documentation of everything, your process, your testing results, the mathematics behind your design. Can you provide that? Elena thought of her notebooks, hundreds of pages of handwritten calculations, diagrams, observations, the accumulated evidence of countless nights when sleep had seemed less important than understanding. I can provide that. Then let's change some minds. They shook hands. Sarah's grip was firm, confident. Elena's was trembling slightly, but she didn't let go until she was sure Sarah understood. This wasn't just about a competition. This was about proving that knowledge didn't belong to institutions. It belonged to anyone stubborn enough to pursue it. The International Innovation Summit took place in a converted opera house that had been retrofitted with the aggressive modernity of glass and steel. 600 attendees from 47 countries. Press from every major tech publication. Live streaming to an audience of millions. Elena stood outside the venue, staring up at its architectural grandeur, and felt absurdly small. She'd never been inside a building like this, never worn clothes like the ones she'd borrowed from Sarah, a tailored blazer that didn't quite fit right, pants that were slightly too long, shoes that pinched her feet, because they were the only professional pair she owned. Sarah had submitted Elena's project under a carefully constructed pseudonym, Dr. E. Mendoza, independent research consultant. The credentials were vague enough to be plausible, specific enough to get past initial screening. And it had worked. Against all odds, Elena's water purification system had made it to the final round. Top 15 projects out of over 3,000 submissions. You ready? Sarah asked, appearing at Elena's elbow with a press badge and a small equipment case. No. Good. Confidence is overrated. Confidence is... Come on. They entered through a side door marked for presenters and technical staff. The interior was overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than Elena's yearly salary, floors so polished she could see her reflection, walls lined with digital displays showing the summit's sponsors, major corporations, university research divisions, government science foundations. This was not a place for people like her. The finalist presentations would take place in the main auditorium, but first there was a networking reception where judges and presenters mingled over champagne and catered food that Elena didn't recognize. She stood near a wall trying to be invisible, an old skill she'd perfected during years of maintenance work. But then she saw him, Dr. Marcus Wexler. He was here as a technical judge, his Axion Technologies credentials prominently displayed on his badge. He stood in a circle of other distinguished scientists, holding a champagne flute and laughing at something one of them had said. Eleanor's hands went cold. What if he recognized her? What if he connected the pseudonymous project to the maintenance worker he'd humiliated? Sarah noticed her panic. What's wrong? That man, Dr. Wexler, he's from my company. If he sees me... He won't. Why would he? You're supposed to be an independent consultant here. He has no reason to look twice at you. Eleanor wasn't convinced, but Sarah was already guiding her toward the auditorium where the presentations would begin. The stage was massive. 3 large screens for displaying technical information. A podium with microphones, seating for the judging panel directly in front, 12 distinguished scientists, engineers, and innovation experts whose combined credentials could probably fill several books. One of them was Dr. Wexler. The presentations began. Eleanor watched from the wings as one brilliant project after another took the stage. A revolutionary battery technology from MIT, a new cancer detection system from Johns Hopkins, an AI-powered agricultural system from a German research institute. All impressive, all backed by major institutions, all presented by people with extensive credentials and research teams. Then the host called, "Next we have Dr. E. Mendoza, with a water purification system designed for low-resource environments." Sarah gave Elena a small push. "Go." Elena's legs felt disconnected from her body as she walked onto that stage. The lights were blinding. The audience was a dark mass beyond the illumination. The judges sat in the front row, 12 sets of eyes focused entirely on her. Dr. Wexler was third from the left. She set up her demonstration system with shaking hands. It looked humble compared to the high-tech presentations that had preceded it, assembled from simple materials, nothing flashy or expensive about it. "My name is," she hesitated for one crucial second, "E. Mendoza. I'm here to present a passive solar water purification system designed for communities without reliable access to electricity or complex infrastructure." Her voice sounded thin to her own ears, but the microphone carried it throughout the auditorium. She began to explain the system, falling back on the words she'd rehearsed hundreds of times in her apartment. The science became armor. The mathematics became shield. She described the filtration process, the heat transfer dynamics, the material choices, the cost analysis, and then she activated the demonstration, poured contaminated water, visibly murky, deliberately polluted, into the input chamber. The audience watched as her system began its work, solar collectors heating, water beginning its journey through multiple purification stages, gravity and physics and chemistry doing exactly what she designed them to do. 23 minutes. That's how long the process took. 23 minutes of Elena standing on that stage, explaining each step, answering preliminary questions from judges, trying not to look directly at Dr. Wexler. Then clear, pure water began flowing from the output valve. She collected it in a glass container, held it up to the light so everyone could see its clarity. "This water is safe to drink," she stated. "I've had it tested by independent laboratories. The system removes over 99.7% of biological contaminants, heavy metals, and particulate matter. It requires no electricity, no replacement parts for approximately 5 years, and costs less than $200 to build, using materials available in most regions of the world." One of the judges, a woman with silver hair and sharp features, leaned forward. "Dr. Mendoza, this is impressive. Can you tell us about your research background? Where did you conduct your primary testing?" Elena's throat went dry. "I conducted testing independently, using volunteer participants and local laboratory services." "And your institutional affiliation?" "I work independently. Previous publications in this field?" "None." A ripple of surprise moved through the judging panel. Dr. Wexler was frowning now, studying Elena more closely. "That's unusual," the silver-haired judge said carefully. "Most presenters at this level have extensive publication history. Can you speak to your academic credentials?" This was it, the moment where her lack of proper paperwork would disqualify everything she'd built. Eleanor took a breath, decided on honesty. "I don't have traditional credentials," she said. "I'm self-taught. I don't have a degree from a prestigious university or published papers in peer-reviewed journals. What I have is a system that works, that could help millions of people, and that I built because I believed the problem was more important than my resume." Silence. Then Dr. Wexler spoke, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Let me understand this correctly. You're presenting at the International Innovation Summit, competing against some of the world's leading research institutions, and you have no formal training whatsoever?" Elena met his eyes, saw the moment recognition flickered in his expression. "That's correct," she said. "This is highly irregular," another judge interjected. "The submission claimed—" "The submission focused on the project itself," Sarah's voice rang out from the audience where she'd stood up. "Sarah Rodriguez, investigative journalist. I submitted this project because I believed it deserved consideration based on its merit, not its creator's credentials. I take full responsibility for any procedural issues." The auditorium erupted in murmurs. The host looked panicked, unsure how to proceed. Dr. Wexler stood. "I know this woman. She's a maintenance worker at Axion Technologies. She cleans our laboratories. She has no business being on this stage." "Why?" Elena's voice was louder than she intended, amplified by the microphone. Because I don't have the right diplomas, because I learned from books instead of lectures, because I built this in my kitchen instead of a corporate lab, because innovation at this level requires rigorous training. Does it? Elena grabbed the container of purified water. This water is pure. That's not an opinion, it's measurable fact. The system works, that's not a credential, it's demonstrable reality. You can dismiss me. You can say I don't belong here, but you can't dismiss what I've created unless you're admitting that credentials matter more than results. The challenge hung in the air. The silver-haired judge stood slowly. Dr. Wexler, please sit down. Ms. What is your real name? Elena Cortez. Ms. Cortez, what you've done is certainly unconventional, but I'm inclined to agree with your point. Let's test your system properly. If it performs as you claim, your credentials become irrelevant. The rules clearly state, Dr. Wexler began. The rules state that we're here to identify world-changing innovation, the judge interrupted. So let's focus on that. She gestured to her fellow judges. I propose we conduct a thorough technical evaluation of Ms. Cortez's system. If it performs as demonstrated, we continue consideration. If it fails, she's disqualified. Agreed? 8 judges nodded. 3 remained skeptical. Dr. Wexler sat down, his expression thunderous. The technical evaluation took 45 minutes. They tested Elena's system with increasingly contaminated water samples, measured output quality with sophisticated equipment, questioned every aspect of her design, probing for weaknesses or flaws. Elena answered every question, explained every choice, defended every calculation, and her system performed flawlessly. When the testing concluded, the silver-haired judge looked at Elena with something that might have been respect. Ms. Cortez, your system works, remarkably well in fact. However, your deception regarding credentials is a serious concern. We'll need time to deliberate on how to proceed. Elena nodded. She'd expected nothing less. As she left the stage, she passed Dr. Wexler. He leaned close enough that only she could hear. You've embarrassed yourself and everyone associated with you. When this is over, you'll wish you'd stayed in your place. Elena kept walking, but inside something burned, bright and unbreakable. The deliberation lasted 3 hours. Elena waited in a small holding room with Sarah, neither of them speaking much. What was there to say? They'd taken their shot. Forced the innovation establishment to confront the possibility that genius didn't always come with proper documentation. Now they'd see if the system cared more about rules or results. Through the walls, they could hear muffled sounds from the auditorium, other presentations continuing, the summit proceeding as if Elena's presence hadn't disrupted its carefully maintained order. Regardless of what happens, Sarah finally said, you've already won something important. You've proven your system works. I'll publish the story either way, and it'll reach people who can help you implement it. Elena appreciated the sentiment, but she couldn't deny wanting something more. Not vindication exactly, not revenge, just recognition that her mind mattered. That knowledge without credentials was still knowledge, that a person's worth couldn't be measured by the stamps on their resume. A knock on the door made them both jump. The silver-haired judge entered. Her name was Dr. Keiko Tanaka, Elena had learned. She'd spent 15 years at the UN Development Program before joining the Innovation Summit's organizing committee. Ms. Cortez, she said, the judging panel has reached a decision. We'd like you to return to the auditorium. Am I disqualified? Dr. Tanaka's expression was unreadable. Please come with me. They walked through corridors that felt endless. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd prepared herself for rejection, had armor for that, had practiced surviving dismissal. But hope was dangerous. Hope could break her in ways that rejection never could. The auditorium had filled completely. Word had apparently spread that something unusual was happening at the summit. Additional attendees had crowded in, standing along the walls. Elena stepped onto the stage, feeling exposed under the lights. Dr. Tanaka took the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, the judging panel has made a determination regarding the submission by Ms. Elena Cortez. Before I announce our decision, I want to address the controversy her presence has created. The room went absolutely silent. The International Innovation Summit was founded on a principle that world-changing ideas can come from anywhere. We've sometimes lost sight of that principle, focusing too much on institutional credentials and not enough on innovation itself. Ms. Cortez has reminded us, forcefully, that we need to examine our own biases. Dr. Tanaka paused, letting her words settle over the crowd. Ms. Cortez violated our submission protocols. She misrepresented her credentials, or rather, a journalist submitted on her behalf with misleading information. Under normal circumstances, this would result in immediate disqualification. Eleanor's stomach dropped. Here it came, the rejection she'd been expecting all along. However, Dr. Tanaka continued, after extensive deliberation and technical evaluation, the judging panel has concluded that Ms. Cortez's water purification system represents genuinely groundbreaking innovation. It is elegant, effective, affordable, and addresses a critical global need. To disqualify it based on procedural technicalities would be a betrayal of our founding mission. A murmur rippled through the audience. Therefore, we have decided to allow Ms. Cortez to continue in the competition. Her project will be evaluated purely on its technical merit, as all projects should be. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she was hearing. However, Dr. Tanaka's voice hardened. Moving forward, we will also be reforming our submission requirements. No longer will institutional affiliation be weighted in our initial screening process. We will focus exclusively on the innovation itself. Ms. Cortez, you may have bent our rules, but you've also exposed flaws in our system that needed addressing. Applause erupted, scattered at first, then building to a crescendo. Eleanor stood frozen, tears blurring her vision. Dr. Tanaka gestured for quiet. The final awards ceremony will take place in 2 hours. All finalists should prepare for the announcement. As Elena left the stage, she noticed Dr. Wexler had vanished from his seat on the judging panel. The 2-hour wait was agony. Elena returned to the holding room, where Sarah was already typing furiously on her laptop, drafting the story that would break, regardless of the final outcome. "You made it through," Sarah said, looking up with fierce pride. "That's already a victory. I haven't won anything yet. You won the right to be judged fairly. In a system designed to exclude you, that's everything." Elena wanted to believe that, but she'd seen the other finalists' projects, revolutionary technologies backed by millions in research funding, teams of experts, years of development. Her kitchen table invention, no matter how effective, might simply not be impressive enough. She thought about her apartment, the notebooks filled with handwritten calculations, the prototype built from scavenged parts, all the nights when exhaustion had felt like drowning, but she'd kept working anyway. If she lost, at least she'd know she'd tried. If she lost, at least the system would have had to look at her work instead of dismissing it unseen. If she lost— "Stop catastrophizing," Sarah said without looking up. "I can hear you spiraling from here. I'm not—" "You are, and it's understandable. But Eleanor, regardless of what happens in that auditorium, you've already changed things. The summit is reforming their policies because of you. That matters." Before Elena could respond, Dr. Tanaka appeared in the doorway again. "It's time," she said simply. They filed back into the auditorium, which had somehow become even more crowded. The final awards ceremony was apparently the main event. Press photographers lined the walls, video cameras on tripods captured every angle, and the judging panel had reassembled in the front row. Dr. Wexler was back, but he'd been moved to the end of the panel. His expression was carefully neutral, but Elena could see the tension in his jaw. 15 finalists stood on the stage in a line. Elena was positioned near the end, between a team from Singapore working on vertical farming systems and a solo inventor from Brazil with a new type of prosthetic limb. The host, a polished woman with perfect hair and a dress that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent, took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the final awards ceremony of the International Innovation Summit. This year, we received over 3,000 submissions from inventors, researchers, and innovators around the world. The projects you see represented on this stage are the culmination of countless hours of work, brilliant minds, and the determination to solve some of humanity's most pressing challenges." Applause. Camera flashes. "Before we announce the winners, I want to acknowledge that this year's summit has been unconventional." Polite laughter from the audience. "We've been forced to examine our own assumptions about what innovation looks like and where it comes from, and that examination has made us better. So thank you to all the finalists for pushing us to grow." More applause. "Now, for the awards. We'll be presenting third place, second place, and our grand prize winner." Elena's hands were shaking. She clasped them behind her back where no one could see. Third place, with a prize of $50,000 and mentorship opportunities, goes to the vertical farming system from the National University of Singapore. The team beside Elena erupted in celebration. They moved forward to accept their award, a crystalline trophy and an oversized check. Second place with a prize of $100,000 goes to the Advanced Prosthetic System from Dr. Paulo Ferreira of Brazil. More celebration. The Brazilian inventor looked stunned, tears streaming down his face as he accepted his award. Helena's heart was hammering so hard, she thought everyone must be able to hear it. There were only 13 projects left, hers and 12 others. The host smiled. And now, for our grand prize. The winner will receive $250,000 in funding, a feature in Global Innovation magazine, and most importantly, the recognition that their project represents the future of human innovation. A dramatic pause. This year, our judging panel had an extremely difficult decision. Several projects demonstrated exceptional technical merit, but there was one that stood out, not just for its innovation, but for what it represents about the democratization of knowledge and the power of determination. Elena stopped breathing. The grand prize winner of this year's International Innovation Summit is time stretched. The silence felt infinite. Elena Cortez, for her passive solar water purification system. The words didn't make sense at first. Elena stood frozen, certain she'd misheard. Then Sarah was shouting from the audience. The host was gesturing for her to come forward. The other finalists were applauding, some enthusiastically, some politely, some not at all. Elena's legs carried her to the center of the stage on autopilot. The host handed her a trophy, surprisingly heavy, shaped like a water drop made of crystal, and a check with more zeros than Elena had ever seen in one place. Miss Cortez, would you like to say a few words? The microphone appeared in front of her. The audience waited. Elena looked out at the crowd. Hundreds of faces, press cameras, video recording devices, all focused on her. She saw Dr. Wexler in the front row, his face a mask of suppressed fury. She saw Sarah crying openly, giving her a thumbs up. She saw other faces too, young people in the back rows, probably students or early career researchers, watching her with expressions of hope. Elena started, her voice cracking. She cleared her throat. I don't have a prepared speech. I didn't think I'd need one. Gentle laughter rippled through the audience. I'm not good at talking in front of crowds. I'm better with my hands, with building things, with figuring out how systems work. But I want to say something important. She gripped the trophy tighter. This award isn't just about a water purification system. It's about the idea that knowledge doesn't belong to institutions. It belongs to anyone curious enough to pursue it. You don't need permission to learn. You don't need credentials to think. You don't need someone's approval to solve problems. Her voice grew stronger. There are millions of people out there, cleaning offices, working night shifts, taking care of families, who have brilliant ideas they've been told don't matter because they don't have the right paperwork. I hope this shows them that their minds are valuable, that their ideas deserve to be heard. That intelligence isn't measured by diplomas. It's measured by what you do with it. The applause started slowly, then built to a roar. Elena looked directly at Dr. Wexler. Someone once told me to leave innovation to people who understand what they're doing. I'm grateful he was wrong. The applause intensified. People stood. The ovation spread through the auditorium like a wave. Dr. Wexler stood too, but his applause was mechanical, his expression rigid. Elena didn't care. She'd already won something far more valuable than his approval. She'd won the right to be taken seriously. The week following the summit passed in a blur of interviews, photographs and opportunities that made Elena's head spin. Global Innovation magazine wanted a cover story. TED invited her to speak. 3 major universities offered her honorary positions, research fellow appointments that came with resources and respect, no degree required. Most significantly, a consortium of international development organizations contacted her about implementing her water purification system in communities across sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia and Latin America. Her kitchen table invention was going to reach people who needed it. Sarah's article broke 2 days after the ceremony. The maintenance worker who beat the system. It went viral within hours, millions of views, shared across every platform. The comments section became a battlefield, some celebrating Elena's achievement, others insisting she'd cheated, that credentials existed for good reasons, that her success was a fluke that would ultimately harm scientific rigor. Elena read the criticisms once, then stopped. She had work to do. Axion Technologies fired her, of course. Dr. Wexler pushed for immediate termination. citing misuse of company time and resources. Elena didn't fight it. She had better things to do than clean laboratories for people who'd never respected her anyway. The prize money was more than she'd earned in 5 years. For the first time in her life, she had breathing room, space to think, time to create without exhaustion pulling her under. She rented a small workspace, not fancy, just a room with good light and enough space for her equipment, put a sign on the door that made her smile every time she saw it: E. Cortez Independent Research. No doctorate, no false credentials, just her name and her work. 3 months after the summit, she received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Keiko Tanaka, the silver-haired judge who'd advocated for her inclusion, appeared at Elena's workspace with a proposal. "We want you to help us redesign the Innovation Summit's evaluation process," Dr. Tanaka said, getting straight to the point. "You exposed flaws in our system. Help us fix them." "I'm not sure I'm qualified." "Elena," Dr. Tanaka's voice was gentle but firm, "you've spent your entire life being told you're not qualified. Are you going to keep believing that?" Elena looked around her workspace, at the prototypes in various stages of completion, at the notebooks filled with new ideas, at the letters from communities around the world asking for her help. "No," she said, "I suppose I'm not." Over the following year, Elena worked with Dr. Tanaka to reform how the Innovation Summit evaluated submissions. They implemented blind technical reviews where credentials were hidden until after initial assessment, created pathways for non-traditional innovators to receive mentorship and support, established a fund specifically for projects from self-taught inventors. The changes were controversial. Some established researchers complained about lowering standards, others worried about fraud or pseudoscience slipping through. But applications from non-traditional innovators increased by 340%, and the quality of innovations, measured by real-world implementation and impact, actually improved. It turned out that genius, when you stopped gatekeeping it, was more common than anyone had imagined. Elena never went back to cleaning laboratories, but she also never forgot what it felt like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to have your mind treated as worthless because it lacked official validation. Every project she took on, she asked herself, who is this reaching? Who is being left out? Whose voice am I making space for? Dr. Wexler eventually resigned from Axion Technologies amid controversy over his research practices, allegations that he'd taken credit for junior researchers' work for years. Elena felt no satisfaction in his downfall, just a quiet recognition that cruelty often stems from insecurity. 6 months after the summit, Elena was invited to speak at a community college in her old neighborhood. The audience was mostly adult students, people working full-time while trying to finish their education, single parents taking night classes, immigrants learning in their second language, people like her. She stood at the podium in an auditorium much smaller than the Innovation Summit venue and felt more nervous than she had on that grand stage. "I dropped out of high school when I was 16, she began. "I spent almost 20 years thinking that meant my mind didn't count, that real knowledge only happened in universities, and people like me were locked out forever." Heads nodded throughout the audience. They understood. "I was wrong. Knowledge isn't a club with membership requirements. It's not a resource that some people deserve and others don't. It's a human right, messy and democratic and available to anyone stubborn enough to pursue it." She pulled out her old notebook, the one she'd carried to the summit, now battered and stained but precious. This notebook contains no peer-reviewed citations, no footnotes to prestigious journals, just my handwriting, my mistakes, my questions and my attempts to answer them. And it was enough. Her voice cracked slightly. "You are enough. Your curiosity is enough. Your determination is enough. The world will tell you otherwise. It will demand credentials and permission and validation, but I'm here to tell you that the world is wrong." The applause was thunderous. After her talk, a young woman approached her, maybe 22, with tired eyes and a backpack covered in duct tape repairs. "I'm studying engineering," the woman said, "but I'm thinking about dropping out. It's so expensive, and I have to work so much that I'm failing classes anyway. Your story made me think maybe I don't need the degree." Elena stopped her gently. "Don't drop out because of me." The woman looked confused. "I succeeded despite lacking credentials," Elena continued, "but I also suffered for it. I was dismissed, humiliated, and locked out of opportunities for decades. If you can get that degree, get it, not because it makes you smarter, you're already smart, but because it opens doors. It gives you access. It provides a shortcut past gatekeepers who shouldn't exist but do." She squeezed the young woman's shoulder. Fight for a world where credentials matter less. But while you're living in this one, use every advantage you can get. The revolution doesn't require martyrs. It requires people smart enough to use the system's tools to dismantle the system. The woman left, looking thoughtful, and Elena felt the weight of responsibility that came with visibility. She'd become a symbol, the self-taught genius who beat the establishment. But real life was more complicated than symbols allowed. Yes, she'd won, but she'd also paid a price in decades of dismissal and doors that never opened. The system needed to change, and she was working to change it. But in the meantime, she'd never tell someone to make their path harder than it had to be. 5 years after the summit, Elena stood in a village in rural Kenya, watching children fill containers with water from a purification system identical to the one she'd built in her apartment kitchen. 73 communities across 12 countries now had access to clean water because of her work, not because of some massive corporate initiative or government program, just her design, open-sourced and freely available, implemented by local communities with local materials. The children laughed as they splashed in the clean water. Their parents watched with expressions Elena recognized, the relief of a problem solved, a fear eliminated. Ms. Cortez, a translator, approached with a village elder who wanted to thank her. Through the translator, the elder said, "You have given our children a future. How do we repay such a debt?" Elena thought about all the answers she could give, but in the end she chose the simplest. Teach them that their minds matter, that they don't need permission to solve problems. That's all the payment I need. Later, sitting in the shade while the purification system hummed quietly in the sun, Eleanor pulled out a new notebook, her 7th since the summit. She was working on something else now, a low-cost medical diagnostic tool that could work without electricity. The pattern was the same. Notice a problem, research obsessively, build prototypes, fail repeatedly, persist anyway. She'd received offers from major universities, full professorships. Despite lacking any academic credentials, she'd turned them all down, not out of bitterness, but because she'd discovered she worked best independently. No committees, no politics, no institutional constraints, just problems that needed solving and the freedom to solve them however worked best. Sarah had asked her once, during an interview for a follow-up article, whether she was angry about the years spent invisible. Elena had considered the question carefully before answering. "I'm angry at the system that made it so hard, but I'm not angry at my path. Those years taught me things no classroom could have: resilience, self-reliance, and the ability to learn without guidance. I wish the world were different. I'm working to make it different, but I wouldn't erase my past even if I could." She'd paused, then added, "The people who suffer most aren't the ones who eventually break through like me. It's the thousands of brilliant minds who never get the chance, who die in poverty while working night shifts. Their potential untapped because the world never made space for them. That's what keeps me working. Not my own vindication, their lost possibilities." Now, in the Kenyan village, watching her invention do the work it was meant to do, Eleanor felt something she'd rarely experienced. Peace. Not the peace of arrival. She'd never stop creating, never stop solving problems, never stop pushing the boundaries of what was possible. But the peace of knowing her life had meant something, that her mind, dismissed and devalued for decades, had contributed something real to the world. On her apartment wall, she still kept that small apartment even though she could afford better now, she'd framed 3 things. First, the rejection letter from the Innovation Summit. Second, a photograph of the first village to implement her water system, children playing in water that wouldn't make them sick. Third, the quote that had sustained her through the hardest nights, now modified with her own addition: "The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled, and fire doesn't ask permission to burn." A few months after Kenya, Elena received a letter, actual paper mail, forwarded through several addresses before finding her. It was from Dr. Wexler. She almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. The letter was short. "Miss Cortez, I've followed your work since the summit. What you've accomplished is undeniably impressive. I'm writing to apologize for my treatment of you. It was unprofessional and, more importantly, cruel. I justified it by believing credentials guaranteed competence, but you've proven that belief wrong. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm simply acknowledging that I was wrong and you were right. Your work matters. You matter. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that. Marcus Wexler." Eleanor read it twice, felt the complicated mix of emotions it stirred. Vindication, yes, but also sadness for all the people who'd been dismissed by men like Wexler and never received apologies. She wrote back, not because she owed him anything, but because she'd learned that harboring anger was heavier than offering grace. Dr. Wexler, I accept your apology. I hope you use whatever influence you have left to open doors for people the system wants to keep locked out. That would mean more than any apology. Elena Cortez. She never heard from him again, but 6 months later, she noticed that a new scholarship program at Axion Technologies had been established. Full funding for talented individuals without traditional credentials to pursue research projects. The program's name, the Cortez Fellowship. She smiled when she read about it, allowed herself one moment of satisfaction, then got back to work. 10 years after the summit, Elena was invited back as a keynote speaker. She stood on that same stage where she'd once been humiliated, now as one of the most respected innovators in her field. Her water purification system had reached over 2 million people. Her subsequent inventions, diagnostic tools, agricultural solutions, emergency response equipment, had expanded her impact exponentially. The audience included the new generation of Innovation Summit participants, researchers from prestigious institutions, yes, but also self-taught inventors, community organizers, and people who'd found unconventional paths to knowledge. The system was changing, slowly, imperfectly, but changing. I'm not here to tell you that credentials don't matter, Eleanor said, her voice steady and sure. They do. They provide access, resources, and recognition that self-taught people have to fight much harder to achieve. She paused. But I am here to tell you that credentials aren't a measure of your worth. They're not a measure of your intelligence. They're not even a reliable measure of your knowledge. They're just credentials, paper and institutional stamps. She looked out at the audience, seeing faces of all ages, all backgrounds, all paths. What matters is what you do, what you create, how you contribute. Whether you leave the world better than you found it. That's how we should measure human value. Not by the institutions that stamped our papers, but by the impact of our actions. The ovation lasted 3 full minutes. Afterward, a young man approached her, maybe 17, with eyes full of hope and fear. I want to be like you, he said. I want to invent things that help people, but I can't afford college, and I'm not smart enough to get scholarships, and I don't know if... Stop, Eleanor said gently. First, you're plenty smart. Second, there isn't one path. There's your path. Maybe it includes college, maybe it doesn't. But either way, start now. Don't wait for permission or perfect circumstances. Start solving problems that matter to you. Start learning. Start building. The path reveals itself as you walk it. But how do I know if I'm doing it right? Eleanor smiled. You'll fail. Repeatedly. 17 times if you're as stubborn as I was, and then on the 18th try, something will work. That's how you'll know. She pulled a small notebook from her bag, a new one, crisp and clean. Here, fill this with your questions, your failures, and your attempts to answer them. That's where all knowledge begins. Not in classrooms or laboratories. In the simple act of being curious enough to ask and stubborn enough to seek answers. The young man took the notebook like it was sacred. Maybe it was. As Elena left the summit venue that night, she passed the spot where she'd once stood outside, staring up at its grandeur and feeling impossibly small. She wasn't that person anymore. She'd grown, achieved, become someone the world recognized, but she also carried that person with her always, the maintenance worker who dared to think her mind mattered, who refused to accept that knowledge belonged only to the credentialed elite, who built something world-changing with her own hands because no one else would. That person was her foundation, her reminder, her reason for continuing to fight for a world where intelligence wasn't gate-kept, where curiosity wasn't credentialed, where the measure of a mind was what it created rather than what papers validated it. Elena walked through the cool evening air, already thinking about her next project. There were always more problems to solve, always more people who needed help, always more barriers to break down. She'd spent decades being told she wasn't enough. Now she spent her days proving that everyone was enough, if the world would just get out of their way and let them try. In Elena's workspace, mounted above her desk where she could see it every day, was the framed rejection letter from the Innovation Summit, not as a trophy of vindication, but as a reminder. The world had measured her value by a piece of paper and found her wanting. She had measured herself by what she could create and found herself sufficient. In the end, only one of those measurements mattered, and it wasn't the one the world had chosen. The mind doesn't need permission. It never did. Before we seek credentials, we must remember, every degree was once earned by someone asking questions no one had answered. Every institution was built by someone who dared to think differently.